And we have a super special guest today.
Brenda Davis.
So exciting. Hi, Brenda.
Good morning.
Hi, Julia. Hi, Shane. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Thanks for being on our show. You know, it's like a dream come true to have you on our show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tell the listeners more about yourself. You know, you have so much to offer to this world. And
thank you. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my professional life and a little bit about my personal life. My professional life, I've been a dietitian for about 37 years, and I've been a vegan for about 31 years.
Wow.
And so you can imagine when I became a dietitian, I was trained in the traditional way, and also I had only met one real live vegetarian in my whole life, and I had never heard of a vegetarian or vegan dietitian. And it seemed to me that the two didn't go together very well, because all of our resources for educating people were based on 4 food groups, 2 of which were animal based. And so it was really scary when I first made the decision, because of animal rights and because of the environmental concerns and all of that, to go vegan. I didn't know if I could continue in my profession. And I remember thinking to myself, what else will I do? I love nutrition. I love dietetics. And I just decided that I needed to have the courage to stay and try to change things from within my own profession. And so it was a really big challenge. But when I moved from Northern Ontario, I was actually a public health nutritionist in Northern Ontario. And I moved from Northern Ontario to Vancouver. And that's where I met other real live vegetarians, like Basanto. And it was in fairly short order after moving to Vancouver that Basanto, myself, and one other colleague, Victoria Harrison, decided to write a book on vegetarian diets. And we were just amazed that within a very, very short time, we had 2 authors to publish the book. And they were kind of fighting over who was going to get us. It was so, we had a 1-page little proposal. That was it. And within, I think, 8 months, it became a bestseller, a national bestseller. And then it got picked up by other, publisher in the States. And so since then, I've written 12 books, and I'm on my 12th right now. It's due June 30th. And we've sold close to 1 million copies, I think 14 or 15 languages now. So things have really got on a roll eventually. And Basanto and I became kind of leaders in this whole plant-based nutrition world, and went on to do a lot of really neat things. One of the things that I ended up doing was a research study in the Marshall Islands. And they have the highest rates of diabetes on the planet. And that was just fascinating. I was there for about 8 months. And a couple of years ago, I went with John Kelly, who's the founding president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And we went and did a lifestyle intervention, a demonstration project in Lithuania for the government and for the medical school. And so I've been having some really, really interesting experiences. And in 2007, I was inducted into the Vegetarian Hall of Fame. But probably the biggest honor is I received an email not so long ago that I'm going to be the recipient of the Luminary Award for the International Congress of Plant-Based Nutrition in September.
Oh.
And the other winners have been Colin Campbell, Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, Michael Clapper, Neil Barnard, and Hans Dio. And so I'll be the first female, the first non-doctor, and the first Canadian to win this award. So I think I'm the 6th recipient, and I couldn't believe it when I got the email. I thought, really such a huge honor, and there are usually about 1,500 people at these events, and so I'm not sure what's going to happen now with COVID though, so we'll
No.
And then in my personal life, well, I've been married for 42 years. I have 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren. And we moved to Calgary recently to be close to my mom, who's 82. And with COVID, I've been very grateful that I'm close to her, because I spend a couple of hours every day with her. And to be close to our daughter and grandchildren. Our son is actually on Vancouver Island doing a double master's right now. He's back to school. So anyway, he's busy.
Right, everyone's keeping super busy here.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I meet you, I mean, we've been friends for so long, you've been such an exciting person, you live life, to the fullest, but you also give so much, there's so many people admire, but I'm not surprised, you just do so much.
Oh, thank you.
It's so inspiring. You always were, to me, since we met,
Well, thank you very much. I so appreciate that, Julia.
So what does a typical day look like for you? Wake up.
I like it. The question will be different whether it's pre or post COVID.
Let's go. Let's keep it on the COVID.
So
what do you do when you're in quarantine, kind of COVID, to stay healthy?
So with COVID, my typical day is I start the day with exercise. So I do either a bike ride or a run, or if it's horrible weather, I'll do a video exercise aerobics, and sometimes a little abs or whatever. But I try to get an hour or 2 of exercise in, somehow walks and the exercise, and then the rest of the time is divided between writing this book. It's called, the book I'm currently working on is called Nourish. And I'm writing it with a pediatrician from San Francisco. Her name is Reshma Shah. And it's going to be a sort of authoritative guidebook for families on nutrition and diets and in general. And I'm super excited about it. This is, Reshma is just an amazing co-author. I just love working with her, as I've loved working with Basanto on many books. But I think it'll be a really exciting book. So a lot of the time with writing, and then the other 2 projects that I've been working on are I'm doing a continuing education program for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine on diabetes, along with some other experts, but it's been a huge project. I'm doing 3 modules myself. And then the other one is I'm doing a research study with PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It's not a research study, it's more like a review of ketogenic diet. So I've been a part of that. And so just a few different projects, but the main one right now is the writing.
Well, obviously the COVID-19 is not stopping you.
Yeah,
No, it's not stopping. You're stuck
inside.
And I have to tell you the pre-COVID story, because pre-COVID, I was just on that holistic holiday at sea, but right before that in December, I had one of the most outrageous experiences ever. I went to, with about 10 other, mostly physicians from North America, we went to Saudi Arabia for their lifestyle medicine conference. And in Saudi Arabia, I've never received treatment like what we received there. It was insane. So anyway, the first day we got there, we had a beautiful tour of the city and all of that. But the second day, they took us, we weren't even sure what we were doing. They took us to the airport and boarded us on a private 747 jet, which was like the ones you see on TV with the big couches and the big, all the big lazy boy chairs, and you've got service, just constant food coming at you, just everything you can imagine, every kind of fresh squeezed juice you would ever dream of, you name it, they had it. They flew us to the south of the country to see historical ruins that had never been open to the public before.
Whoa.
It was incredible. So sometimes my life is pretty exciting.
Not just sometimes. I think.
It was quite an experience.
Amazing. And how do you...
And one of the main organizers, have you heard of Khaled, Prince Khaled? He's he's a very strong vegan animal rights activist. He was one of the main organizers of the conference.
Wow.
So yeah, it's awesome.
Wow.
Oh.
How do you slow down after having such a busy day in the evening? How's this looking for you?
Well, right now, every single evening, this is very unusual for me to take this much downtime, but my husband and I bike over to my mom's house, which is about 5 minutes away, and we spend about 2 hours with her. We play games, we watch shows, we go for walks, because she's 82 now, and she's alone. My father died several years ago. And I just did not want her to be isolated during the whole COVID thing. So we continue to do the exact same things. We order all her food for her, we clean it before bringing, and we visit her every single day. So that's a great enjoyment for all of us, I think.
It's amazing. I love how you put the priority in, because, everyone is so busy, but it's about priorities too, right? That we make time for things that really matter.
That's right. It's a really big, family's got to be a big priority. And I just, my mom has done so much for me all my life. It was time to give something back to her. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's so much controversy. We're going to get on some health tips because we have a registered dietitian here that's seen it all. You probably get this a lot of time, but people hating on soy, saying you're going to grow these man
boobs.
Boob shirt, man boobs. So what's your opinion if people are worried or hear all these things? I mean, we probably know what it is, but to be coming from a registered dietitian, what would you have to say?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I find it just so frustrating. I really do. Because what people need to think about is soy foods make plant-based eating easier. They make it healthier. They make it tastier. You can do so much with soy foods because they're high. Soybeans are fairly high in fat, so you can make milk and yogurt, and you can make all kinds of things out of soy and tofu and tempeh and all of these good things. And the protein in soy is about the same, and even the digestibility. If we're looking at tofu, about the same as what you would get from meat or dairy or any of the animal products. And so it's a super high quality protein. It's high in calcium, it's high in iron, it's high in fiber, it's high in potassium. It's a really quite nutritious. And then the other thing is that what we know is it reduces risk of prostate cancer, it reduces risk of breast cancer, it reduces risk of heart disease. It even helps to alleviate some of the symptoms of menopause. It improves renal function. It helps with symptoms of depression. It provides a gentler protein for the kidneys. So everything's good. And if you look around the world at the healthiest people on the planet, to me this is really the acid test. You look at the healthiest people, the people of the blue zones, the longest lived people on the planet. 2 out of the 5 blue zones eat soy as a steak. If it was poison, they probably wouldn't be the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet. To me, that's the real acid test. And you look at the 2 blue zones that do use soy regularly, Okinawa and Loma Linda, and they average about 2 servings a day. So this is not a minor amount, and so I think I think basically when you think about all of that, I mean, some people believe that the phytoestrogens in soy are dangerous. What phytoestrogens in soy are actually serums. They're selective estrogen receptor modulators. So they are like very weak estrogens, and in some tissues, depending on the type of estrogen receptor in those tissues, they act as weak estrogens. In other tissues, they act more like anti-estrogens. In some tissues, they don't have much of an effect at all. But in breast tissue, for example, one of the reasons they help reduce risk of breast cancer, especially if you've eaten it during childhood and adolescence, is that it acts as an anti-estrogen. It keeps the more aggressive human estrogen off the estrogen receptor site. So it actually has a really positive effect in that regard. And so that's what people need to understand. These are very, very weak estrogen. There have been lots of studies on men. It doesn't change your testosterone, doesn't change your sperm production, doesn't change any of that unless you're eating. They had 2 cases of men who had feminization kind of effects from eating soy. Well, one guy was eating 12 to 14 servings a day, and the other guy was eating 20 servings a day. That's pretty much all they were eating was soy, and of course you're going to get, those are ridiculous, unrealistic amounts to be eating. What's normal and natural in populations who are soy-consuming populations is 2 to 4 servings a day for adults, 1 to 2 servings a day for children. Then the other thing that I would say about soy is one of the other concerns is a lot of soy is genetically modified to withstand pesticides. And so for my personal use, I choose organic soy. So I avoid the pesticides and GMOs and all of that. So I think that you want to be eating, if you're eating soy, mostly first generation soy food. So less processed things like edamame and tofu and soybeans and tempeh and those kinds of things. Soy milk, if it's organic or at least no GMO, is a reasonable choice. You want to be eating less of the very highly processed soy. So soy cheese and soy veggie burgers. Not that you shouldn't eat soy veggie burgers, because I think they can play a role in the diet, and they're so handy. And when you're having company, we had company from Bulgaria. They eat meat and cheese. That's the main part of their diet. And so we bought some veggie burgers. We did a barbecue. I'm not sure if they even knew it wasn't meat. And that, that can be really, really helpful. And so I think for the occasional times, they're a very reasonable thing to be eating once in a while. But I don't think they should be kind of your daily fare. And, we don't really know, to be honest, it would have a negative effect. One thing we do know is veggie meats tend to have a lot less isoflavones because of the way the proteins have been processed before they're used to make veggie meats. It loses a lot of the isoflavones. So people that are concerned about getting the phytoestrogens, there's a lot fewer phytoestrogens in the soy products. So that's my little summary on soy.
If someone has cancer and is starting to eat soy, is it safe?
Yeah,
I heard weird. Well, if you have cancer or had cancer, it's not safe to consume soy.
Yeah, no, that's kind of ridiculous, actually, because the studies that we have, but as a matter of fact, women who take tamoxifen, for example, tamoxifen is a serum. It's a selective estrogen receptor modulator, just like soy. And so they've done studies looking at women who consume soy while they have breast cancer, for example. And what they find is it actually reduces risk of recurrence, and it reduces risk of dying of the breast cancer if you're eating soy while you have breast cancer. So and we know that it's not even something that's debated anymore. We have so much research that we know that it's not only not harmful, it's actually protective, at least as far as breast cancer is concerned. And it seems so for prostate cancer as well, especially aggressive prostate cancer. So, I would say there's no problem eating a reasonable amount of soy when you have cancer, especially if it's organic and it's not as heavily processed.
Right. Yeah, because I remember my mom, she was at the cancer clinic and they were telling her no soy, but maybe it's just because doctors are a little behind the science, I find.
Well, I'm saying, when was that?
This probably would have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago. No, it was down here.
Yeah. So 5 years ago. So in 2012, just so you know this, the American Cancer Society and the American Institute for Cancer Research actually issued statements saying that it not only is it no longer a problem, so it could actually be protective for breast cancer. So this was 2012. So if people were still saying that, they weren't keeping up with it.
I'll have to tell my mom to eat some more soy.
As simple.
That it's not what they said. Yeah, so on another health tip, how do we get adequate zinc and iodine in our diets? Because a lot of things are washed, and all the iodine kind of goes away from all of the sanitization and just heavy washing, right?
Stuff, right?
Yeah, so they're really two. If you just rely on food for iodine, if you're a sort of a plant dominant eater and you include some fish and some eggs, you're going to get some iodine from that. But if you're a plant exclusive eater or a vegan like we are, then your options are a little less. So yes, you get iodine from plants grown in iodine-rich soil, but the amounts vary a lot depending on the amount in soil. And for a lot of people, you're not going to get quite enough from just your vegetables and fruits and whole grains and such. So there are two other places that you can get it. Well, really three. You can use a supplement or a multivite with some iodine in it. But in terms of food, there is a seaweed and iodized salt. And so those are your two main sources. And so what I would say is if you use salt, which most people use some salt, choose iodized. And if you're concerned about the additives in iodized salt, like if there's aluminum or whatever, read the label. It's there in black and white. Lots of salts don't have those additives. You can also choose a natural sea salt with added iodine. And that's another option for people. So there are a variety of options. The Himalayan salts and all of the fancy salts are not good sources of iodine. And so people need to know they are not reliable sources of iodine. So in terms of seaweed, seaweed is absolutely loaded with iodine. So you can eat like a 16th of a teaspoon of kelp powder and get enough iodine, like 150 micrograms is what you need. You don't want more than 1,100 micrograms, though, because you can get symptoms of toxicity. It can actually negatively affect your thyroid. And so if you're eating something like a lot of kelp, you could easily be exceeding the upper limits for iodine. So you need to pay attention to that. The other thing is that you've got wakame and arami and all of these different seaweeds. The one seaweed that's lower in iodine and safe to eat in fairly large quantities is nori. And that's the seaweed you use to make sushi, or you buy in those little seaweed snack packs that you just eat. That you don't get. So when you get about 25 micrograms from a little pack or a nori sheet or something like that, and that's a very reasonable amount. You're not going to OD even if you eat a few packs. It's not that much. Salt is a good, fairly concentrated source. I can't remember exactly how much, but I think about if it's in a powder, it's probably like less than a teaspoon. It's not as concentrated as kelp, but it's way more concentrated than nori. It's somewhere in between. So you do need to be conscious of how much you're getting from those. And then the other one is hajiki. And hajiki is a seaweed you probably just should avoid completely. If you have a little bit when you're at a Japanese restaurant, there's a little bit of something, it's no big deal. But not something you want to be eating on a daily basis because it's really high in the type of arsenic that's quite toxic. And so many countries actually have, health cautions, advisories against eating hajiki for that reason. So that's not one you want to be getting iodine.
Right. Just to clarify, is this daily? You should be taking like a 16th of kelp, or should?
Yeah, exactly. So yes, exactly, Shane. So a sprinkle of kelp powder on your salad or in your soup. You don't even taste it. It's such a small amount. That's a very reasonable way. And one of the things that I do want to say is iodine is super important, especially for pregnant and lactating women and for children. The number one cause of preventable mental retardation on the planet is iodine deficiency. So it's not something you want to fool around with. The consequences of iodine deficiency, the severe consequences, are irreversible brain damage to your child. So you need to make sure you have a reliable source of iodine in your diet. It's very uncommon in North America to see severe iodine deficiency, but it is very common to see fairly mild iodine deficiency that affects your thyroid function. And so you do want to make sure you're choosing either the iodized salt or a little bit of seaweed or a combination of both, or even a multivite that includes. And you need to know if you're thinking of becoming pregnant or are pregnant, a lot of prenatal vitamins do contain iodine, but a lot don't. So you've got a prenatal supplement that it does include iodine.
Right. Are you able to maybe take like more one day, or does it better to take a little bit every day?
I would say it's probably ideal to take a little bit every day, but it's not like B12 where you take it kind of twice a week and you're all good. Yeah, I would be a little more. Yeah, because not that you couldn't probably do that. I haven't seen a lot of studies looking at differences in when you would take it. But I think on the safe side, you want it to be part of your daily diet.
Okay, so it doesn't really get stored in your body that much?
You'll get some stored. You'll get some stored, yes, because it's a mineral. But I'm not quite sure how well we store it. So I would be a little cautious. And also, you don't want to be overdoing your amounts because that can be harmful.
Depend on which geographic country you live in that you need.
Absolutely.
Let's see if you're more on coastal living, right? Or like if you see more in the tropics, right? It might depend on that.
Yeah. Well, there are actually some areas, if you go on the internet and look at the maps of iodine amounts in different countries, there are certain parts of Europe that are very low. The soil is very low in iodine, and other parts of Europe that it's pretty good. And in North America, we're kind of in between, but again, there are some parts that are better than others. And it's not always as predictable as what you might imagine. So it's a good idea to know, but I mean, we eat food from all over the planet. So
Civilizations.
Yeah.
Really goes to show how close we are with the ocean, that we need, that mineral that really is from a lot of the ocean stuff, right?
Yes, exactly.
Brenda, we're really into bread making these days. Well, especially Shane, I would say, right? So.
Yeah, I became a sourdough baker the last year. So I just wanted to know, what's your take?
That's so interesting. You started the trend.
I started before it was trendy.
Yeah.
We call his starters have even names, like Poofy Starter, and what was the other one?
Starter. That's the only one I have. Okay. I only have one name.
The only one you have.
That's awesome.
Speaking about that, what's your take on multi-grain sourdough bread for health, and maybe bread in general? I mean, obviously, to try to get the most simplest ingredients, I think would probably be better. But what's your take? Is it healthy or not to have breads? I know that it's cooked at high temperature, and maybe there's some darkening and some acrylamide, because when carbs are cooked.
So just so you know, acrylamide requires an amino acid called asparagine to form, and so that amino acid is more concentrated in potato products, whether it's regular potatoes or sweet potatoes. So at the top of the list are, the fried, these fried potato products and French fries and potato chips. So those are really high in acrylamide. The bread products are much lower because they're much lower in asparagine. So it's less of a concern with bread. I mean, you can still get advanced glycation end products and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and all of those things. But in terms of acrylamide, it's not as big of an issue with bread. So I would say a couple of things. I think that sourdough bread definitely has some advantages over regular bread because of the bacteria and the acids, which can, maybe slow absorption. But the research isn't super clear. It's been on both sides of it. It may lower the GI a little bit, but it does tend to make it more digestible, and I think it reduces the phytates, And so it really can have some nice advantages. And if you're making a simple with whole grains and so forth, then I think it's a really nice choice for bread. Now, when we talk about breads, the amount of bread a person should eat really depends on their state of health and their energy requirements, because it's a fairly concentrated carbohydrate source. And so for young people who are active, it can be an excellent addition to the diet. And generally with bread, the heavier the better, because you look at a light fluffy bread, so you look at, light fluffy brown bread versus light fluffy white bread, they both have a GI of over 70. So they're very high glycemic index, higher than sugar actually, to get broken. So it's just because sugar's half, table sugar's half fructose, half glucose, and fructose has a very low GI, whereas bread would be more glucose, which has a higher GI, and so it gets broken down, and it has quite a large impact on your blood sugar. But if you can stand on the bread, like the German pumpernickel bread, really heavy stuff. It might have a glycemic index of 45 or 48 or something like that, so much, much lower. And you can see sometimes the whole kernels of pie or whatever in it. So that type of bread is really ideal for people who really want to have their bread, but have some issues with blood sugar or want, slower digesting carbohydrates. Now, what I would say is people who are fighting against chronic disease, they're diabetic, they're overweight, all of those kinds of challenges. You want to really go lightly on processed grains. So, and I'm not talking about refined grains. I'm talking about just whole grains. So whole grains, if you think of the grain as it's picked off the plant, you've got barley or Camus berries or wheat berries or quinoa or whatever it is. Nothing harmful has been added. Nothing healthful has been taken away. And it takes your body a long time to break down those intact grains, even if they're cooked or they're sprouted or however they're done. It takes you a while to be able to use the sugars from those foods. Now, if you cut those grains and you turn it into steel cut oats, you expose the grain to a little more air. You help your body break it down a little, so it's a little higher GI. It's a little lower nutritional value because it's been exposed. And then if you take that grain and you roll it, you're exposing more of the surface area of the grain. And then from there you shred it. You're exposing even more. Then you grind it. Well, that surface area is greater still. And then you plate it and you puff it. And the puffing process makes it very readily absorbed. And so the glycemic index can be 80 or 100. It can be very, very high. And so even within the whole grain world, there is a hierarchy of whole grains that begins with the intact grain working our way down. And so for people with diabetes or people who are overweight, you want your grains to be predominantly intact, just as they're picked off the plant, as opposed to being more heavily processed. And also, when you think about flour, even if it's whole grain flour, nobody eats a bowl of flour. You often are adding sugar and salt and fat and all sorts of things before you eat that flour. So the least of the worries is bread, because you're not adding a lot of fat, you're not adding a lot of sugar. But when you think about other things you might make with flour, the muffins and the cookies and the cakes and so on, those are things we really need to think twice about, especially if we have diabetes or heart disease or something like that. Now, for people that are very active, like athletes, they can afford to eat quite a bit of that stuff. That you still want it to be as healthy as possible. But if you need 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, it's pretty easy to meet your nutritional requirements, and you can afford some extra.
Wow, good to know.
It's good to know. So make denser rye, pumpernickels.
Needs to be heavy, right?
I better get some rye.
You weigh your loaves.
And your bread, your sourdough is it's wonderful. It's homemade. You're controlling what's added. It's a lower GI than a lot of other breads. It's got, It's been broken down with the fermentation, the phytates and so on. It's a really good choice. So don't feel badly about your bread at all. I think it sounds great. I would go
so much.
Let you
Like
try
we
some.
wouldn't eat very much, and then all of a sudden I started making it, and it's like every week we have like a loaf or sourdough pizza.
Yeah. Oh, that's a treat.
That's so good.
It's a treat.
It's so good.
It's so good. I make bread sometimes as well, and my husband says don't make it very often. Too much.
Like, freeze it.
Then he can eat the whole bowl.
Freezing actually helps, if we want to have a quick snack or something, we can reach to the freezer and get some.
You pre-cut it and freeze
slices.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really good.
Some nut butter and whatever.
Butter, hemp seeds, go to.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. Well, I have another question for you, Brenda. Like, what are easy ways to switch to a fully plant-based lifestyle when you don't know anyone, like when no one is on board around you, you're the only one, like you in Northern Ontario, right? Like, it feels so daunting when you're the only one.
Yeah, it does. And I remember those days. And I think there are a few things people can do. One thing that I think is quite helpful is just to make an effort to connect. And so know that in almost any city or town, there are people, there are support groups, there are potlucks, there are talks going on to try to engage in the plant-based community and start to make connections with people that are on the same page as you. I think that's really important to your longevity and to keep inspiring yourself by reading and listening to things and to keep yourself on track. But you also want to connect with the people that aren't on the same wavelength as you. And to me, the best way to connect is to share food. Joyfully, without judgment, make it delicious. And most people love to be exposed to really good tasting, healthy food. It's kind of exciting. And so whether you're bringing something to work, whether you're sharing with your neighbor or your family, when you go to dinner, bring something that they can taste. To me, that's a really important thing to do. And I have to tell you a story because one of the things that I think is most important is just your example to other people. Your compassion, your joyfulness, your generosity, all of the things that being vegan is really about. And I can remember friends we had way back when we lived in the Vancouver area. Our daughter made friends when she was, 4 or 5 years old with a little girl down the street, and we ended up becoming best friends with her family. And her father, I remember, first time we had dinner there. His wife, I told her we were vegetarian, so she made tofu. It was lovely. But he was a steak and potatoes and popcorn man. Those were his three main, And when they came to our house for supper, and popcorn with a half a pound of butter, I kid you not. And when they came to our house for supper, he brought his own steak. And you can imagine, as vegans, he brought his own steak to the barbecue. Because he didn't know what else he ate, right? And so whenever we would go on little holidays or campouts or whatever we were doing together, his wife and I, we would go over the menus of what we were going to have. So if there were burgers, they would bring burgers and we would bring veggie burgers. If there was lasagna, she would make their lasagna, we would make our lasagna. If there, whatever. We would all have the same kind of food, but theirs would be a meat-based version, ours would be a plant-based version. And then he got diagnosed with high cholesterol. And he said to me, maybe I'm going to try one of those veggie burgers of yours. And just because he was getting really worried about his health. And then one weekend, we ended up going to Galliano Island together. And he said to his wife, let's just eat whatever they're eating instead of having our food. And that was it for him. He never went back to eating meat again. And this was probably 7 or 8 years after we had just started being friends with him. It took a long time, but I never judged him. I always just loved him and accepted him. And I think it was just our example and seeing the food and getting comfortable with the food that allowed him to make that transition. And so I think you really can have an impact, even on people that are very resistant by your kindness. And that's, to me, the most important thing of all.
Does cholesterol go down?
Oh, you bet.
Well, we want to reassure the lifestyle change.
Well, it does. I mean, typically the average vegan cholesterol is 3.9, 4.2, something like that, compared to the non-vegan who would be maybe 5 or something, so or higher.
What a great story! I love it.
Yeah,
Thanks for
great
sharing
story. Yeah. So speaking about going on to a vegan diet, how do we stay on track and not fall off the wagon, as they say, on a vegan diet? Because I know a lot of people start it and then they don't, and then they just go back. Yeah. So it's hard to,
It's hard because we don't live in a vegan world yet.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I can tell you 30 years ago, people didn't even know what vegan was. It was so unusual to be vegan. Today, I can remember when I first started seeing the word vegan on products. Oh, I was beyond myself with excitement that I would see the word somewhere. And today, it's everywhere. You can't go into a restaurant almost that doesn't have at least one vegan option. It's a whole different world, and it's so much more vegan friendly than it used to be. You think of the documentaries and the groups and just everything going on the internet and how aware people are of factory farming and of the environmental consequences of our food choices. It is a very, very different world, and so it's easier now. It's much easier now. But that having been said, it's still not easy. And so I think people need to keep reminding themselves of why they're doing what they're doing. You need to re-inoculate yourself every so often by watching a documentary about what animals actually go through. You need to watch the documentaries on the environmental consequences of our food choices. You need to just look at that stuff and keep yourself immersed in it. Make connections with people that are on that same page. And the other critical thing is, I think, is to plan ahead. If you're going to a restaurant, make sure there's something on the menu, especially when you're going with your non-vegan family and they pick some steakhouse or something, so that they know there'll be something that you can order on the menu, and that they've got a little heads up that they need to be thinking about that for that meal. And when you're traveling, to bring a little bit of food with you. When you're going to someone's house for a meal, to offer to bring a main dish to share, and let them know that you're vegan and that you would love to make something to share. I just think it's really important to plan ahead. But I think for a lot of people, the falling off the wagon is more common for people that are just doing this. I shouldn't say just, but they've chosen to do plant-based health. And their health starts getting better, and then they feel like, wow, it wouldn't hurt to have the piece of fish or a little bit here and there. I think the people that are more apt to stay completely vegan are the people that are vegan, that really have bought into the animal and the ecological issues. And because those, once you take the blinders off, the blinders are off. I find it really hard to understand how someone could go back once they know. Once you know what you're contributing to, you really know. And I think for a lot of people who do know now that aren't vegan, it doesn't make them an incompassionate person. It doesn't make them a cruel person. It's more about, for people that don't go there, it's more about, I think that one of the number one reasons why people just won't change their dietary habits is because one of the requirements as a human being is to belong. And that need to belong to your tribe. If your tribe is all about food and wine, you're a foodie, and every connection you have is about food. To veer from that means you no longer belong. And for a lot of people, we just rather be dead than to not belong. And so it can be a very slow transition, and to find another group you can belong to. It's very, very hard for people. And so I get that. I really get that. I think there are a lot of ways to be compassionate in the world, and not eating animals is one way, and some other people are all about preventing sex slavery in children, and I mean there are lots. So I think it's really important to respect one another and be grateful for what we are able to do, but to also to share as much as we can in terms of the wonderful food and how much people can enjoy a meal that doesn't necessarily involve pain, suffering, and death. And that is a new concept for a lot of people. But we need to understand that we can't, look at this pandemic, we can't as a human society continue doing what we're doing. We just can't. It may take 50 years before we get to the point that we need to get. I mean, and for some people that never want to stop eating meat, thank goodness we're culturing this stuff now. And maybe we'll get to the point where they can purchase it without having to cause the pain, suffering, and death of animals to get there. There are lots of people that are working on different ways of stopping the torture and death of 70 billion land animals a year. I just so agree with so many of the great philosophers who questioned when humans would get that ethics involves compassion, and that animals should not be excluded from that. It's they are thinking, feeling beings that deserve our mercy and our compassion. I just hope and pray we get there eventually.
Yeah, us too.
It's crazy to think like more animals died than ever people died in our whole humanity. That's crazy to think about.
Well, yeah, and you've got 70 billion is like 10 times the entire human population that are slaughtered every single year. It's just mind-blowing. And of course, the source of our pandemics are, these intensive, confined conditions of the animals we're eating. So we need to recognize that it's got to stop. It's inhumane, and I think that we as a species have got to be smart enough to figure out how to feed ourselves without torturing all of these innocent beings. We've got to have the brains to do that. That's why I'm all in favor of culturing meat. Wouldn't necessarily eat it myself, but for people that really want it, but at least it's a way of growing it. It doesn't involve these kinds of wars and slaughterhouses and all of that. I think we've gotten to the time in the evolution of the human species that we've got to say this has to stop, and it needs to stop ASAP if we're going to save ourselves as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah. Well, any exciting news you got coming up? I know you said you got a book at the end of June coming, but any other exciting news? And
Yeah. So
listeners
the book will
find
be
you?
out in November. Yeah, the Nourish will be out in November. It's already up on Amazon for pre-order. And then, I'm writing another book with Basanto. We're starting in November on
Another one.
protein.
She said the last
And,
one was gonna be our
yeah.
last one. And we said, no, it's not going to be your last one, Miss Sen.
Yeah, Basanto agreed to do these couple of little books, and so I thought, well, they're not big books, so I'll offer.
She loves writing anyways,
Yeah.
right?
Born to write.
Yeah. And how can the listeners find you?
Well, I have a website, BrendaDavisRD.com. My email is BrendaDavis@telus.net. And I've got a Facebook page. I'm happy. Every time I get a friend request, the first thing I do is check if I don't know them, that they're on the plant-based wavelength or they're vegan. To that effect, they're my friend. That's it. And so I'm not doing a lot of individual consults right now just because of all my deadlines. But do those on occasion, and Basanto does as well. So.
Great. Oh,
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for this
thanks for your
amazing
time.
interview and your time and everything, who you are, Keep on shining the light, throughout the world. That's what you do, not just like in Canada. It's like throughout the world. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Julia and Shane, and thanks for doing what you do. I love what you're doing, and your website's awesome. So thank you for all the efforts you're doing and for educating everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Appreciate that.
kindness. That's so awesome. Well, we can't wait to meet you in person again. I haven't seen you for so long.
Yeah, maybe Calgary.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You take care. Stay safe and healthy.
Yeah,
And
stay safe.
Too.
all the best with your
Thank
book
you so much.
and all your.
Thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much. I appreciate that.
Take care.
We'll talk soon. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Ciao.